Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're tearing into the incredible forensic and mechanical details behind the only unsolved case of air piracy in commercial aviation history. You know the legend of D.B. Cooper, the guy in the sharp business suit who hijacked Northwest Orient Flight 305, demanded a fortune, and literally vanished into the night. But today, we aren't just swapping campfire stories. We're going to strictly examine the cold, hard evidence. So let's just dive right into it by confronting the impossible climax of this whole true crime mystery. How do you step out of a commercial airliner into thin air? I mean, how does a human being physically pull that off? To really grasp the sheer mechanics of what went down on Thanksgiving Eve in 1971, we have to strip away the myth and look at the terrifying reality of that exit.
Section 1. The Ultimate Disappearing Act.
To make sense of the forensic evidence left behind, you've got to put yourself right at the edge of that Boeing 727's aft air stair. Set the scene in your mind. The cabin wasn't a quiet, pressurized sanctuary anymore. At 8:13 p.m., it had turned into a screaming wind tunnel. The plane's tail section is violently pitching upward as Cooper deploys those heavy aluminum stairs. He's standing on the threshold of a freezing vortex, staring down a 170-mile-per-hour slipstream and a 15-degree Fahrenheit wind chill. It's a staggering contrast, right? Just hours earlier, he was the picture of a calm, polite businessman ordering a bourbon and 7-Up. And now he's willingly plunging into the sensory violence of a pitch-black, freezing storm over the rugged Washington wilderness. And think about the sheer audacity of this for a second. He wasn't just jumping. He was jumping with 19 pounds of ransom cash. That's 10,000 individual $20 bills. He actually rejected a cloth bag from the airline because he thought it was too cumbersome. Instead, displaying this incredibly calculated coldness, Cooper took out a pocket knife, cut the shroud lines from one of the parachutes he was given, and used those thick nylon cords to physically strap this massive 19-pound bundle of cash right around his waist, directly over his business suit.
Section 2. Mastering the Boeing 727.
You see, Cooper's escape wasn't just raw guts. It was a literal masterclass in aeronautical engineering. He didn't just pick any plane. He specifically targeted the Boeing 727-100 for its highly specialized capabilities. Just look at the hyper-specific flight demands he gave the crew. He dictated a maximum altitude of 10,000 feet, which let him breathe without an oxygen mask. He demanded the landing gear stay deployed and the wing flaps be set to exactly 15 degrees. Why? Because the 727 was one of the only commercial jetliners of its era that could actually remain in slow, low-altitude flight, around 100 knots, without stalling out and crashing. By forcing these parameters, Cooper completely controlled the aerodynamic environment of the plane, without ever having to set foot in the cockpit where the three pilots could have easily overpowered him. And this is where the whole industry insider narrative really takes flight. Cooper knew a massive secret about the 727's design. The switch to lower the aft air stair was in the rear of the cabin, and, crucially, its operation could not be overridden by the pilots in the cockpit. Civilian flight crews weren't taught this because, well, there was zero reason to ever lower the stairs during a commercial passenger flight. But the CIA knew this. They used 727s to drop agents and supplies behind enemy lines in Vietnam. And D.B. Cooper, he knew it too. In fact, Cooper's exploitation of this mechanical loophole was so flawless that it permanently altered global aviation. After this unsolved hijacking, the FAA mandated that every single Boeing 727 be retrofitted with a device called a Cooper vane. Basically, it's an aerodynamic latch that physically blocks the rear door from being opened once the plane hits flight spades. His singular escape fundamentally changed how aircraft were built. But here's where the story kind of fractures. For all his aeronautical brilliance regarding the aircraft itself, his jump logic completely baffles the experts. As former FBI lead investigator Larry Carr pointed out, no seasoned paratrooper would ever make this leap. Plunging into zero visibility, freezing rain, over dense, mountainous forests, while wearing slip-on loafers and a trench coat, that is practically a death sentence. And this creates a massive narrative tension. Was Cooper an aeronautical genius? Or was he just a foolish, incredibly lucky amateur who didn't fully grasp the physics of what he was doing? This brings us to what we call the parachute paradox, which brilliantly illustrates that exact contradiction. Cooper demanded 4 parachutes, but when he finally jumped, he left behind a fully functional, steerable sporting parachute. Instead, he strapped on an older, non-steerable military bailout chute. And it gets worse. The reserve parachute he chose to wear was actually a dummy chute, a literal prop intended strictly for classroom demonstrations that had its panels completely sewn shut. If he really was a highly trained paratrooper, how on earth could he fail to recognize a fake parachute? Section 3. Clues left behind. So, what did this phantom actually leave behind after he stepped off that vibrating aluminum stair into the abyss? Despite an absolutely massive physical search across Washington state, we're talking the military, door-to-door sweeps, even an SR-71 Blackbird spy plane photographing the drop zone from the edge of space, the wilderness yielded nothing. However, inside this sealed environment of the airplane, the FBI meticulously recovered 66 unidentified latent fingerprints. Yet, tantalizingly and super frustratingly, not a single one of those prints ever matched anyone in the massive federal databases. Let's zoom in from the macro scale of that roaring, massive 727 all the way down to the micro scale of seat 18E. That was the exact spot where Cooper sat. He was meticulous about taking his bomb and his handwritten ransom note with him, but he did abandon a few intimate ghosts. Investigators found 8 Raleigh filter-tip cigarette butts in the ashtray, a single brown head hair resting on the seat, and, most famously, a black JCPenney clip-on necktie complete with a mother-of-pearl tie clip. Part 4. Secrets of the tie. This tie brings us to our absolute strongest case for the industry insider theory. Because that cheap clip-on tie, it was hiding a galaxy of microscopic evidence. Decades after the hijacking, a team of citizen sleuths got their hands on Cooper's tie and analyzed it using modern electron microscopy. What they found on the fabric was absolutely astonishing. The tie was coated in over 100,000 microscopic particles. They found unalloyed titanium, which was incredibly rare in the 1970s and mostly found in highly specialized metal fabrication or chemical plants. They also found rare earth minerals, like cerium and strontium sulfide, materials directly associated with Boeing's supersonic transport development project at the time. They even found lycopodium spores, which tie right back to pharmaceutical manufacturing. All this evidence forces us to weigh the two sides of D.B. Cooper. Do these rare earth minerals, combined with his hyper-specific knowledge of the 727's flaps, speeds, and unoverridable aft air stare, prove that he was an aeronautical engineer? Did he actually help manufacture the very plane he hijacked? Or did he just buy a secondhand tie from a local thrift store? The evidence points tantalizingly toward the factory floor for sure. Section 5. The River Ransom Money. For nearly a decade, the Washington wilderness stayed completely silent. The search parties had totally given up. But then, in February 1980, an 8-year-old boy building a campfire on the banks of the Columbia River unearthed our final perplexing clue. Young Brian Ingram was raking the sand at a beach known as Tina Bar when he struck 3 bundles of rotting, rubber-banded $20 bills totaling $5,800. The serial numbers were a perfect match to Cooper's ransom. But listen to this timeline, because it presents a deep geological paradox. The jump happened in November 1971. But in 1974, the Army Corps of Engineers dredged that exact section of the river, depositing a thick new layer of clay and sand on the banks. The crazy part? The money was found buried within this newly deposited sand. So how could money drop from the sky in 1971 end up buried inside a layer of dirt that literally didn't exist until 1974? Modern science recently added another massive twist to this riverbed mystery. When analysts looked at the recovered bills under a microscope, they found diatoms, which are a type of microscopic algae. Now, the crucial point here is that the specific species of diatoms found on the money only bloom during the springtime. This scientific fact proves that the ransom money did not enter the waters of the Columbia River in the freezing, dead-of-winter month of November 1971. It had to have entered the water months or perhaps even years later. And that leaves us with the ultimate true crime paradox. Did the man in the business suit actually survive the helling vortex, bury a stash of cash years later, and vanish into the world with his remaining $194,000? Or did he crash into the dark, frozen timberline, leaving the river to slowly wash away his secrets over the decades? The evidence we've explored today, the titanium particles, the masterful flight plan, the dummy parachute, those springtime diatoms, it all paints a picture of a man who is equal parts genius and phantom. D.B. Cooper outplayed the system, changed aviation forever, and then just stepped out of history and into legend. So what do you think happened in the dark that night?